USC is getting a little bit harder to recognize, and their out-of-conference schedules are starting to get a lot softer. And I don't like it.
You are Locked On Trojans, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Fight on, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Holkin, and thank you for making Locked On USC part of the Locked On Network your first listen every day. Whether you're watching this show on YouTube, wherever you're going to download this podcast, this show is going to be free, and the show is always going to appreciate your support. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Yeah. Place your first $5 bet, and you're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I guess here's my question. Why was it okay for USC to schedule Minnesota for an out-of-conference game, 13 years ago? Not that long ago. But it's not okay for USC to schedule Cal or Stanford for an out-of-conference game today. If you haven't heard, USC found their replacement game for that Ole Miss series that was canceled earlier this year. I'm really starting to lose a little bit of faith in the way USC is doing things. And I'm not going to point a finger at any one individual. I think this is a collective agreement. But, maybe down the line, I'll start narrowing down the evil villains in this plot. Right now, it just appears like USC is going the way of the dodo bird. You know how they used to do everything hard, and they're just going for the path of least resistance. Look, if you're going to go the schedule of soft, and then jump right into a hard game, why not just schedule? I don't know if that's beneficial for the team. Again, if you're going to schedule a Georgia Southern and a Missouri State, why not just schedule a team from California? I'm sure San Diego State will make room for you. I'm sure San Jose State will make room for you. I'd like to go Cal Stanford every other year. Not two. I just have them on the schedule. So instead of playing Lane Kiffin, USC's schedule in 2025, they've got a tune-up game against Missouri State before Clay Helton brings the Georgia Southern Eagles into the Coliseum. That's going to be USC's first two games in 2025. The last time USC played Missouri State, I believe, was in basketball. USC football has not played a team that was considered a quote-unquote non-major, or in this case, a non-FBS team in 72 years. Okay? A long time ago. When that happened, they played a team called San Diego Navy. That was in 1952. USC won 20-6. That year, USC finished 10-1. Oh, by the way, with that soft schedule and that one loss, they finished number 3 in the country. I believe Michigan State won the national championship. They were voted number 1 because they were 9-0. Go compare schedules. I guarantee you're going to look at USC's and go, really? How did USC not get at least a piece of the national championship? USC doesn't have any future games against an FCS opponent, which is a good thing. However, Missouri State right now, today, in 2024, they're playing an FCS schedule because they are a member of the Missouri Valley Conference. They are an FCS level team. That's right now. But starting next year in the 2025-2026 academic athletic year, they're moving into Conference USA. They'll be an FBS level team. So technically, USC is keeping her pristine record and reputation intact. But, I think we're splitting hairs here. You're bringing in a virgin FBS team. Sure, they have played against other FBS teams, but Why should their first game as an official member of the big boys be at the expense of USC? USC gets nothing out of this. Absolutely nothing. I don't support this at all. And I'll tell you what, I might be the last man standing on this hill, but I'm making this my own personal Mount Suribachi. And I don't mean any offense to our service veterans. I apologize if you took it that way. But I'm going to protect, the old USC any team, anytime, anywhere flag. You're going to have to pry that thing out of my dead cold hands. Again, I don't mind if you're bringing in Clay Helton as a warm-up before Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss shows up. I do mind when you're bringing in a program that's even lesser than Clay Helton's Georgia Southern Eagles team. And here's why I'm getting a little upset about this. I'm noticing a trend. This started back when those rumors were flying around that USC didn't even want to play LSU in Las Vegas earlier this year. Remember that? Well, that was USC's biggest fist fight. I guess since we'll say the former champ is on their comeback trail. That's USC. Fortunately for everyone, that fist fight didn't get canceled. USC won. And that's why people's, and I'm using finger quotes, expectation levels is higher right now. Remember, USC was one play away from being 4-0. Look, if you were paying attention, I have been. We've been getting this not so subtle message from USC's fight promoters that, look, the LSU, I'm telling you, that LSU game might be the last marquee out of conference game the Trojans sign up to play. Remember, don't forget this, earlier in the year, remember when Coach Riley tried to sidestep the annual Notre Dame game? Yeah. That's when my ears went on full radar mode. Like, all right, what's going on here? We're already hearing rumors. You don't want to play LSU. You're kind of being a little wishy-washy about keeping the USC Notre Dame, rivalry game alive. And then not too long after that, the Ole Miss series got canceled. And allegedly both sides agreed, but depends. Sometimes some people believe that USC threw in the towel. Who knows? Doesn't matter. They're not playing. I was looking forward to that. I was looking forward to the chance of USC beating two former USC Trojan head coaches on back-to-back weekends. That fight's not happening. So instead, the Missouri State Bears will be the tune-up fight before Clay Helton brings the Georgia Southern Eagles back into LA, his old stomping grounds. And don't forget, USC is probably going to be playing their first conference game of 2025 after those first two games. Are they going to be ready? What if it's Michigan visiting the Coliseum? Is USC going to be ready? They're not going to be tested by anybody. So explain to me, how does this improve USC's team? Playing two Tickle Me Elmo Doll teams, it might get some of the younger players a chance. They'll get some playing time. But again, how prepared will the team be when they're playing Michigan or another, whoever it is from the big conference? What if USC has to play on the road again? And look, don't even get me started on trying to sell these games to USC fans. I still remember the start of the second quarter against Wisconsin this year. Again, USC was one play away from coming home 4-0. Excuse me, 3-0. Undefeated from Michigan. I apologize. So all of a sudden, USC, which, most people don't anticipate USC making the playoffs or contending for a national championship this year. So assuming they finish 10-2, okay, that's my low bar threshold. Is that going to say, all right, USC, yeah, I got to show up for those first 2 games next year. Again, we can't even get the fans inside the stadium before the game kicks off. You think you're going to sell tickets to those games? Early September, late August? It's hot in LA. I mean, look, even last weekend when it was 85 degrees, 12:30 kickoff. The cheap seats excuse was, it's too hot. Didn't want to be inside the stadium. We were standing in the concourse, in the shade. Look, I understand getting inside the Coliseum can be an issue sometimes with security. It's not the best system. I get that. But I used to host a tailgate. And it wasn't that long ago where I was there crack of dawn, hosting, tearing down, and I was still inside that stadium at least 30 minutes before kickoff. My point is this: plan accordingly. I don't want to hear the excuses of why you can't get inside the stadium. If Michigan can squeeze 110,000 people in before kickoff every time, USC fans, figure it out. You're better than that. Come on. But again, back to USC's out-of-conference scheduling. This whole taking the path of least resistance, not a fan. I mean, I used to enjoy, have fun for 5 minutes beating up my younger brothers, but it wasn't satisfying. So the argument for playing the soft schedule is it gives USC a better chance to make the playoffs. I wholeheartedly disagree. My response to that argument is this: USC 10-2 every year is going to get you into the playoffs. And when this thing moves to a 14-team playoff system, which it's going to very soon, it's a guarantee. 10-2, you're in. So maybe in the past, the committees that were deciding on who should be playing for the championship, those computers, maybe they overlooked the strength of schedule component. But here's the thing: going forward, you're going to have a bunch of 10-2 teams. And I think being undefeated, 11-1, that's going to be the exception to the rule. The way these super conferences are being formed, I'm saying that strength of schedule is actually going to be looked at more closely because you're going to have more teams with 2 losses. And I'm talking about the Alabamas and the Georgias of the world, the Ohio States, the Michigans. So if you got 10 wins and 2 or 3 of them came against, the Sisters of the Poor, the Mercers, the Western Kentuckys, the Citadels, give me a break. Tell me who you beat, and don't give me the Sister of the Poor. I think USC's win over LSU should weigh more than Alabama's win over Western Kentucky later this year, or the Citadel, whenever. Again, my everydayers, you're going to remember when I said this. Remember when I said, let's schedule Stanford or Cal? There's so many more benefits. Less travel. You're keeping tradition alive. Bigger crowds, which is going to equal more money, better TV. And the team is going to be better prepared for their own conference schedule. So give me a Bay Area school and Notre Dame every year, and then go find me a chunk. I'm not saying it's got to be 3 Power 4 teams. But give me Cal or Stanford every year, as well as Notre Dame. And go find me a San Jose State, a Hawaii, a San Diego State, a Fresno State. Don't give me a Missouri State or a Georgia Southern. That's not going to put butts in the seat of the Coliseum. I mean, again, Georgia Southern, a sacrificial virgin FBS team. Yeah, no, let's not go this route. Unfortunately, we're going this route next year. Hopefully, it's the last time. Hey, NFL fans, start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. I know you got your mind on 3-4 different games. You have a hunch, you got to check out what's going on. Well, now You can check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play. And you can do even more than that on the same place where you're going to be placing your bets. If you've never used FanDuel before, here's your chance. You're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed, when you place your first $5 bet. Sounds pretty easy. Sounds like easy money. That's FanDuel.com. So let's talk a little bit more about USC's next opponent, Minnesota. USC travels to Minneapolis, play the Golden Gophers. USC ranked number 11 in the country. They're 3-1 overall, 1-1 in the big conference. They're hitting the road. And again, Minnesota, they're 2-3 overall, 0-2 in conference. Both USC and Minnesota have one thing in common. They both lost to Michigan in Ann Arbor. Same score, 27-24. And both teams had really strong second halves against Michigan. USC was, again, one tackle away from being, well, today they'd be 4-0, undefeated. The Gophers, they were one bad call by the officiating away from the chance of, being 3-2, 1-1 in conference. That was a bogus offside call. That's all I'm going to say. WeAreSC.com spoke with Andy Greeter. He's a reporter from the St. Paul Pioneer Press. And he kind of gave us the state of the union on Minnesota's program to date. He said losing to Michigan and Ann Arbor, that's one thing. But that loss came on the heels of, they've already played a rivalry game this year against Iowa. They played that game at home in Minnesota. They play for a statue of a pig. I think it's called the Rosedale Pig. Anyways, Minnesota led that game 14-7 at halftime. Then they were outscored 24-0 in the second half. That's not good news because USC is a second half team. So Minnesota lost to Iowa. They lost to Michigan. And they also lost another game at home to start the season against North Carolina. I think that score was 19-17. So when they're playing Power 4 level teams, they haven't won. So this is what Andy Greeter had to say. Quote, "It's been difficult, obviously, to lose a rivalry game against Iowa. That's always one of the two games that's circled on the schedule. That in Wisconsin. To lose that last one and play as poorly as they did in the third quarter after leading at halftime was really kind of a sour feeling to lose the Rosedale Trophy game. That's the game to Iowa. So that one is always going to be difficult. Michigan was kind of the opposite. They played very poorly in the first half and turned it on in the third quarter and the fourth quarter and made it very, very interesting." Close the quote. So we'll see, if Minnesota is ready to bounce back after having a really strong performance against Michigan. They're back home again now. And again, they're looking for their first conference win this year. You don't want to go 0-3 to start the year in conference. We asked Andy Greeter about, Minnesota's weaknesses, both sides of the ball. Quote, "Number one, the Gophers have been known for a very long time being a traditional Big Ten ground and pound type team. They have not been able to find a consistent running game here this season. They're averaging about 3 yards a carry, and they are struggling, especially on the right side at center on the offensive line. Now, even though the right side of the center has been an issue for Minnesota and for USC, USC's run game has actually been pretty good this year. You've got Woody Marks, and then you've got Quentin Joyner. He's actually earning the staff's confidence every time he steps on the field. But as far as Minnesota's concerned, their weakness, they're not able to run the ball on the right side. On the defensive side, this is what's challenging for Minnesota right now. Quote, "It's been missed tackles. In all 3 of their losses, they've had double-digit missed tackles. That's been the biggest problem. that continually resurfaces for them, end quote. Look, USC fans, we know how that feels, right? That's not what you want to hear if you're a fan. So USC obviously has the talent to make other teams miss, let alone miss tackles. Yeah. We'll see if Minnesota can clean up their Achilles heel before USC gets to town. Now, when USC is on defense, here are three names you want to kind of focus on from Minnesota's offense. Wide receiver, Daniel Jackson. Quarterback, Max Brosmer. He's the transfer from New Hampshire. And running back, Darius Taylor. Taylor, last week against Michigan, caught 10 passes for 52 yards. And then their quarterback threw the ball 40 times against Michigan. It sounds like numbers USC would put up. They did. Remember, Miller Moss threw it 51 times against Michigan. Both teams came up on the short end of the stick. I'm going to mention one other name. Some of you who follow recruiting, you might recognize this name. He's a true freshman. He's really dangerous with the ball in his hand. His name's Coy Perch. Last year, he was the number 53 overall prospect in the country. And he was also a guy that not USC recruited, so did Ohio State. He was highly regarded. Played at a really small school in a really small town. I think like kind of 600 people. Yeah, one of those. Well, he's not afraid of the big time. Last week in Ann Arbor, he had a 60-yard punt return. Yeah, in front of 110,000 people. He also plays cornerback. He has an interception this year. Keep an eye on that guy. Coy Perch. There's a reason USC went after him. And then here are three guys on Minnesota's defense to keep an eye on. Defensive lineman, his name is Ja Joyner. Quote, he's a defensive end that finally got his first full sack of the season at Michigan. He set a goal to have double-digit sacks this year. He's a guy that has been getting more attention by NFL draft scouts, and he started to put it together. He had a season-high 5 pressures against the Wolverines and really became a disruptive impact player. Did USC have anybody like that? Keep an eye on that guy, Ja Joyner. They have a linebacker. His name is Cody Lindenberg. Sounds like a guy from Minnesota, right? He's a freak athlete. He's very cerebral. He leads the middle of their defense. So you also have cornerback Justin Wally. Quote, Justin Wally has been a mainstay at cornerback for this team for over 4 years now. He suffered a knee injury against Nevada, wasn't able to play against Iowa or Michigan. He's really a leader in the secondary, and if he's going to be able to play or not is going to be the key, just knowing what USC can do through the air. So keeping an eye on what the availability report says about Justin is going to be a big key to this game. He also said that he thinks USC's passing game is the biggest threat to Minnesota, which is interesting because, again, they have the number 1 pass defense in the country on paper, but again, they haven't played anyone. My everydayers, you heard me break that down on yesterday's episode of Locked On USC. If you missed that episode, your fault. When you're done with this, go check it out. Final question, what does Minnesota have to do to beat USC? Obvious answer, right? Limit Miller Moss through the air, be able to establish some sort of running game of their own. Quote, they really like Darius Taylor. He was leading the Big Ten at this time last year in rushing. He was a true freshman, but he's not been able to have the holes to create the offense that they want on the ground this year. So I think a combination of stopping USC in the air and running it and being able to run it themselves will be a key to Saturday night. So those were the highlights. If you want to get the full story, go check it out. It's over there on WeRC.com. But again, when you're done making Locked On USC, your first listen every day, then you head on over to WeRC.com to kind of fill in the blanks. Get the other tidbits that I wasn't able to bring to you here. All right, before we get out of here for this show, how about some recruiting? You want a little recruiting tidbits? Of course you do. That's why you're sticking around. So remember defensive lineman Floyd Ducard? He's playing high school ball in Miami. from Canada. He committed to Oklahoma back in July. And that happened. That literally happened after he took an official visit to USC in June, and USC threw up the bat signal, the emoji. Floyd was actually considered a silent commit at the time. And then all of a sudden, a month later, he's heading to Norman, Oklahoma. Well, that didn't last very long. Back on September 16th, all of my Oklahoma fans who are watching the show, Boomer Sooner, you remember, he decommitted from Brent Venables. And immediately, all of the predictions started rolling in for USC. Coach Henney stayed on him. He convinced him, get your butt back to LA. So first you had Scott Schrader from WeRC.com. He put in his prediction. Then on threes, Steve Wiltfong. He dropped his Fong Bong. Well, it's getting close. There's speculation that Floyd is going to make it known sooner rather than later that USC is going to be the place to be. Let me tell you why I'm really confident about this happening. After USC beat Wisconsin this last Saturday, I was down on the field, getting ready to go do the player and coach interviews up the tunnel in the locker room. And I saw Floyd get a big old hug to one of the USC's current Trojan, one of the current defensive linemen on the Trojans roster. They were hugging it out in the end zone. And this particular Trojan asked Floyd, hey, so are you in for sure now? All I will say is this, big smiles. And Floyd was like, yeah, man, I'm here. So, not trying to steal the young man's thunder. We'll wait for the official commitment, but I was a fly on the wall. And from what I was able to ascertain, sounds like Floyd's back in the fold. Like I said, Coach Hanney, he wanted him. Well, here's a different recruiting note. You tell me how you feel about this. And I'm just going to introduce it to you this way. Welcome to the world of recruiting and the NIL bargaining power. That's where we're at. Remember Cardi Smith when he announced his commitment to USC, back in August? Remember when he said he fell in love with USC when he took his official visit in June? And he said he told his mom during that visit, couldn't wait to get, he didn't even want to go back home. He just wanted to stay in LA. Quote, I feel like Coach Riley is the best head coach in the game. It's part of the reason why I committed to USC. Just being in Cali, it's amazing. It just felt like home to me. They can expect to get a dog. The USC visit showed me some different things and made USC a real hard push for me to be here. I'm looking forward to getting back to USC for a game in the fall. Well, I'll admit, Boulder, Colorado, really cool college town. Cardi Smith just got back from an unofficial visit to Colorado, and he plans to return to Boulder the weekend of October 25th through the 27th for an official visit. Yeah. Colorado is hosting Cincinnati that weekend. Go Bearcats. Quote, the latest quote from Cardi Smith. The coach is staying in contact with me even after I committed to another school. Staying in contact with my mom. My mom plays a big role in the commitment. If she's straight, I'm straight. If she feels like that's a place I could be too, we're going to go with it. See what it's talking about. End quote. Let me translate that for you. If the Boulder bag, if their NIL bag is big enough, we'll play for Coach Prime and that dumpster fire. That's exactly what he just said. Not in those exact words, but that was my interpretation of it. That's just the way recruiting is being played right now. Commit, find out what kind of leverage you have, a little bargaining power, and see who's willing to up the ante. According to sources, USC feels really good where they're at with Cardi Smith. They also feel really good where they're at with wide receiver Corey Sims. Well, he's planning to take a visit to Nebraska this weekend. It'll be an unofficial visit. but he'll watch Nebraska take on Rutgers. We'll see what happens there. He's still firmly committed. I feel much stronger about Corey Sims than I do with Cardi Smith. He's planning to come back to USC for the USC versus Penn State game. So next week, he'll be in Lincoln, Nebraska. A week later, he'll be in LA. Right now, he's committed to USC. We'll see where everybody's committed come early signing period. We'll see where everyone's going to be on tomorrow's episode of Locked on USC. You better be right back here. If you're not an everyday subscriber, why not? Become one. It's quick, it's easy, it's free. If you're watching on YouTube, click that subscribe button. Smash that thumbs up button. Both of those mean a whole heck of a lot to the show. Because I don't want you to miss anything, click that bell notification. That way you always know when Locked on USC is there for you. I'll be here for you again tomorrow with another episode. So until then, everyone, you know what to do.